G'day Thorough crew, I'm the Thorough Tank and this is a quick reference guide to the Halls of Valor dungeon on Mythic Keystone difficulty. The video is aimed at helping those who really want to tank but are paranoid of getting into a group of strangers and being judged for their failures and letting people down, which is a big problem when you're tanking with people you don't know. Knowing the route and shortcuts is expected of you and there's no real good resource for you to find them. So this video is designed to arm you with the information that you need in order to confidently tank for a group of people that you have no communication with and will probably never see again. On with the show. Coming up first, you're always going to want to do a double pull on the first two packs. The melee mobs don't really do anything that you need to worry about too much. They just hit you pretty hard, so make sure you keep up your mitigation. The caster is the dangerous one. It's one of the thunder callers. They are of frequent occurrence throughout the dungeon, so you want to get to know them as quickly as possible. They have two main abilities. One is called Thunderous Strike, which is an instant cast that will go on a member of the group. Make sure that if it's targeted on you for any reason, you don't overlap the circle with anybody. And the second one, and the more dangerous one, is their Thunderbolt. You need to make sure that gets interrupted as often as possible. On very high keys, that can just straight up one-shot somebody. This pull is probably the most dangerous in the instance. Let's stop and have a look at it. On the outer edges you've got two of the Valor champions, the melee mobs. You don't need to worry about those. On the second from the inside you've got two of the thunder callers. You want to deal with those the same way you did before, but remember there's two of them and they can target the same person with their thunderous bolt, so it's really important that your group burns interrupts constantly while fighting these, and they're the most dangerous mobs in the pack. The last mob is the dragon in the middle. This doesn't hurt your group too much, it just puts little thunderstorms around the group, but the big ability is lightning breath and it targets you. It sprays out in a frontal cone, and on affixes with a lot of trash damage like fortified, raging or bolstering, it can actually be really dangerous. So you want to keep an eye on the dragon's cast bar and make sure that when he casts lightning breath, you are ready for it. This first boss, Himdall, is a very dangerous one. Tank him next to this pillar here and just put your back to it, face right into the middle. This will help a lot with some of the mechanics of the fight. The most dangerous mechanic in the fight is Horn of Valor. On the cast, they'll do a big chunk of physical damage to the whole group, and then 3 dragons will strafe the area you're fighting him, one lane at a time. You're probably all familiar with this, but there's one really cool way you can handle this that makes it a lot easier and reduces the amount of movement you need to do as the tank. You're seeing me do it here, but I'll explain it in a little bit more detail. Notice how I'm tanking him here against the pillar, right in between the front section and the middle section where the dragons come. What this position does is minimises the amount of movement you need to do to get out of either of those two lanes when the dragons strafe. When one of the dragons strafes a platform, you simply rotate around the boss and move him a little bit into the next section. Then, when the dragon strafes that section, you move back. It minimises the amount of time the boss spends moving and reduces the amount of DPS downtime overall. Keep him out of the dancing blades spinning on the ground and point him away from the group for the bloodletting sweep, which is a frontal cleave. After the boss, you're going to go to either the right or the left, depending on the position of the patrolling sentinel. Doesn't really make much difference which you go. The right side is a little bit easier because there's only one caster and no thunder caller. It's just one of the mystic healers. Make sure you interrupt both abilities that he casts, both Holy Radiance, which is an AoE instant heal, and Rune of Healing, which drops an overtime healing on the ground. If he does get the rune down, just move them out of it. This pull is another one of the extremely difficult ones in this dungeon. There is a Mystic on the left, which is the healing mob. There is a Thunder Caller with it, and then on the right there is a Rune Carver, along with a few melee mobs. You'll see here that I've marked the Thunder Caller with a skull for my group. This goes against conventional World of Warcraft wisdom where you'll nearly always want to kill the healer first. However, in this instance, the healer is relatively easy to keep under control and the Thunder Callers are so dangerous that you want to get rid of them as soon as possible. As the tank, keep your focus on the Mystic. Your group will be targeting the Thunder Caller and using their own interrupts on it, most likely, so they probably won't notice any heals being cast. Therefore, it's up to you to make sure the Mystic stays under control. Up next, you'll either want to grab this patrolling mob or the pack in the middle of the room, depending on where the patrol is. If he's nearby, grab him first like I have here. If he's not, you'll want to grab the pack second. This guy doesn't do anything too bad. If he does a crackle lightning on you like that, just take a step to the side, and if it's high fortified keys, move out of his charged pulse, although most keys this won't be necessary for the tank. Whatever you do, never pull these guys with any other normal packs of mobs, as they prevent stuns and interrupts working on anything around them, and you'll have a really hard time with some of the casters if you're pulling everything together. Grab this pack by aggroing it all at once and then turn around and run back around a corner. This is called a line of sight pull. It was a common trick in the olden days of WoW tanking, less useful nowadays, but there are still situations like this where it can be useful. The reason you're doing this is to make sure the Marksman archer comes back and is nearby with the group. It's a ranged mob and it's not a caster, so you can't interrupt it to move it and it won't move on its own. The Marksman is the last new type of trash mob you'll fight in this section of the dungeon. It will periodically cast an ability called Penetrating Shot, which will target a random member of your group and do a line shot, which will do massive damage to everyone along the line. Just make sure you're not caught in it and trust your group members not to be either. Apart from that, it just does some passive damage to the rest of your group. Next up, you'll want to go straight ahead and grab the 2 Sentinels standing guard by the gate in front of you. You don't have to kill these right now, but it makes things a little bit easier for the rest of the dungeon because they can cause some problems if someone accidentally grabs them. You don't need to pull them backwards, just fight them in the middle of the room. There is plenty of space here. They don't do anything different than the previous guy, but with 2 of them, if they both cast the charge pulse at the same time, you'll probably want to get out of it. How you do this next pull will depend on how much you trust your group. If you're running with a good group who seems to be hitting their interrupts, you can do a double pull like I'm doing here, where you grab everything and bring it together. If you don't trust your group, I would advise not doing this, as there's 2 Thundercallers and a healer in the group, and it'll be pretty hard to control that many casters if you're the only one actually using any interrupts. However, it does save a fair bit of time. I won't go through how to deal with it. The mobs aren't any different than the ones you fought before. Just control them as best you can. Do this next pull together. First up, you're going to want to interrupt the caster, which is standing up on the podium. Make sure you bring him down straight away and don't let him cast cleansing flames throughout this combat. It's usually a good idea to kill him first. The shield maidens are tough when you're fighting 4 of them. They reduce your armor, they reduce your healing received, and they hit extremely hard. So save all of your big cooldowns for this pull and burn them all. Up the stairs, you're going to want to skip this pack in the middle here. They actually don't give any percentage and you can just walk straight around them, so don't worry about trying to kill them. On this mini boss, you're going to want to interrupt the Searing Light casts. It doesn't really do very much damage, but it does do damage and you're not using your interrupt for anything else, so you might as well burn it. The other major ability is called Sanctify, which he shares with the boss, and I'm going to show you a cool trick that makes this mechanic much easier to dodge correctly. Pay careful attention to the pattern in which the orbs come out in. As he pulses the waves out, there will always be 4 large gaps in 4 directions around him. If you stay within these gaps, you can actually stay right next to him and continue to hit him. This works for the boss as well, so I won't go over it again when it comes time to the boss, but pay close attention to the pattern in which the gaps occur. When the ability starts, look for the first big gap and step into it, then you'll get 1 more coming through. Then you'll rotate around to the side and you'll get 2 more big gaps spawning. After that, rotate once more around in the same direction and you'll get 1 more big gap and the ability will end. Once more at full speed, find the gap, wait for the second one, move through, wait for 2 more, move around again, wait for 1 more and the ability ends. It works exactly the same way on the boss, so remember that for when we get there. This other boss doesn't bear too much thinking about. Stand inside the shield if you want, or stand outside it to give your group more room inside. It doesn't really matter, the storm's not going to hurt you much. Tank Herja on the left hand side to start with, using this pattern on the floor as a guideline for where to put her. Maintain spacing from your group for the Arcing Bolt. Use strong defensives for the Shield of Light. Every time she uses this ability, you'll want to swap her side over to the opposite element, so it's useful to use the knockback to actually help you reposition her. Deal with Sanctify the same way I talked about earlier, and repeat that process and go back and forth until she runs out of health. Back inside the hallway, a line of sight pull is really useful for the next mobs. Make sure to use this little corner, it'll help you pull back the Marksman back into position. This pack is another one with 2 Thundercallers, so be careful with your interrupts. Make sure you don't burn them all too early. You want to make sure you at least have some interrupts to desync their casts in case they both try to cast on the same person. Lastly, you want to grab this pack of 3, which is a Marksman, a Rune Carver and one of the Champions. Just interrupt the Rune Carver's casts, move out of the penetrating shot from the Marksman, and you'll be fine. You should be at 80.95% heading through this portal into the fields. Follow this path through the fields to avoid fighting any unnecessary mobs. CC the bull in front of you, run straight past it, and then go to the left of the tree trunk through to Fenrir. This first part of fighting Fenrir is really just a tank and spank. You don't need to worry about any mechanics. The only thing he actually does that remotely threatens you is Claw Frenzy. It's a frontal cone that will hit you for a chunk of damage, but it has no timer and it has nothing signifying when it's going to happen. So you just have to be ready for it. Just make sure you get ready to heal yourself back up and keep your mitigation up while you're fighting him. At 60% health, he'll drop combat and run over the bridge. Just follow him down there to start the next phase. You'll want to clear out these two wolves and then the one standing over by itself. If it's fortified weak, pull them separately as they buff each other's damage, and with fortified combined will be too much to deal with. But if it's not fortified, you can just pull them as a group of 3. Same as before, watch out for the Claw Frenzy. The two differences in this phase, when he does Unnerving Howl, it will summon wolf adds that you need to tank and how you have your group DPS down. They don't hit very hard, so just make sure you keep them in front of you. And he'll also fixate on a group member and chase them. If you're a paladin, you can bop that person and protect them from it so they don't need to kite, but otherwise just follow along and do your best to keep doing some damage while he does it. Apart from that, there's nothing else you need to worry about. Once he's dead, use the speed buff to go back the way you came. Make sure to CC the ram again, run past it and go back through the portal. One quick note, I see a lot of people mount up in that section on the run back. The speed buff means you're actually faster on foot than mounted, so don't mount up. These 4 kings each have one special ability. When they die, they pass that ability on to any that are left alive. The one on the far right has an ability called Call Ancestor, which summons an ad which will slowly walk towards him. If it reaches him, it'll heal him for a small amount of health. It's not worth trying to kill it. It heals actually for the same amount of health that it's got, so you actually don't gain anything by killing it. The easiest thing to do is CC it, or just slowly kite it away. The one on the far left has an AoE ability called Unruly Yell. It's interruptible, so just interrupt when it's cast. If it gets through, it'll do a big chunk of AoE damage to your group. The second one from the left has a tank debuff that increases your physical damage taken. It's called Sever, has a short cast time and lasts for a few seconds. Finally, the one second from the right has an ability called Wicked Dagger, which you'll throw at a random member of the group, not including you. When it hits, it'll do a big chunk of damage and leave a 50% healing debuff on them for a short period of time. This is the kill order that I recommend. When you fight the last 2 together, they'll have the abilities of the previous 2 that you killed, so you'll end up with 2 sets. If you end up with double tank debuff, or worse, double Wicked Dagger, you can have a dead tank or an instantly dead party member very, very quickly. It's quite easy to deal with 2 interruptible casts or 2 summoning adds, so this is the best and the safest way to do it. Skyfall has 2 abilities that you'll need to worry about as the tank. The first is Savage Blade, which is a melee damage attack that he'll do to you. You need to keep up an active mitigation for this ability. If it hits you without one, it'll leave a bleed on you and do extra damage. The second ability is called Ragnarok, and you'll need to use the Aegis of Agrimar to put up an absorb shield for your group to hide behind so that they don't die to this ability. It doesn't really take much effort to do this, just press the extra action button that you'll have on your screen when you're holding the shield. Make sure that you don't use it too soon and everyone will be fine. He'll also use Fellblaze Rush, which is an ability that'll target a random non-tank member of the group and charge to them for some AoE damage. And when he's channeling the shield, he'll also summon fire elementals. You can't tank the elementals, so don't worry too much about those, but you just need to make sure they die as quickly as possible. Odin is a really long fight, but it's actually stupendously easy for tanks. Make sure you dodge the balls that come out from the Spear of Light. Run away from him when he casts Radiant Tempest. Keep the ad interrupted, make sure you don't let it cast Surge. And when he activates the coloured runes around the floor, make sure you identify your colour and head to the correct rune. Like I said, it's a long fight, he's got a lot of health. You'll have to cycle through these abilities a couple of times, but none of them are particularly challenging for you, so just make sure you deal everything correctly and you'll be totally fine. That was a quick reference guide to the Halls of Valor dungeon on Mythic Keystone difficulty. I hope you found it as informative as ever. If you have any questions or anything you'd like to add that perhaps I missed covering in this video, please leave a comment below, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.